When you finally expose her true nature, what collapses first is not the relationship. It is the persona. What you must understand is that the narcissistic personality survives through image. In the language of Carl Jung, the persona is the mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world. For most people, it is flexible. For the narcissist, it becomes a fortress. She has invested enormous psychological energy into crafting how she is perceived. Charming, desirable, morally superior, misunderstood yet extraordinary. This image is not decoration, it is compensation. Beneath it often lies insecurity, shame, and an unintegrated shadow she cannot bear to face. When you calmly reveal inconsistencies, manipulation, or deception, you are not merely pointing out behavior. You are threatening the structure that holds her identity together. This is why the reaction can seem disproportionate. Exposure feels like annihilation. The mask cracks, and with it, the illusion of control. And here is the deeper truth. When you refuse to participate in someone's illusion, you reclaim your reality. The moment you see the mask clearly is the moment you stop being ruled by it. Once the mask begins to crack, the transformation does not move toward humility. It often moves toward strategy. When admiration turns into accountability, something primal is activated. The narcissistic ego does not ask, "How can I repair this?" It asks, "How can I survive this?" And survival, in this case, means controlling the narrative. You may notice a subtle shift. The same person who once seduced you with admiration and intimacy now begins to reposition herself as the wounded party. Stories are reframed. Context is edited. Your boundaries are described as cruelty. Your clarity is described as aggression. What you are witnessing is not emotional chaos. It is reputational warfare. This tactic protects the fragile core from exposure. If she can convince others that you are unstable, jealous, or abusive, then the spotlight moves away from her behavior. The illusion is preserved through distortion. And because social perception is power, she fights for it relentlessly. Understand this clearly. When someone rewrites reality to protect their ego, your greatest defense is not counterattack. It is consistency. Speak the truth calmly. Document facts. Refuse to participate in drama. When you stop defending yourself emotionally and start standing in quiet clarity, manipulation loses its audience. After the narrative begins to slip from her control, you may witness something even more intense. Emotional volatility that seems sudden, dramatic, almost theatrical. But it is neither random nor theatrical. It is what psychology refers to as a narcissistic injury. When the ego, inflated by admiration and reinforced by illusion, is pierced by truth, it reacts as though it has been attacked at its core. You may see rage that feels disproportionate to the situation, or tears that appear sincere, but shift quickly into accusation. There may be cold detachment one moment and desperate attempts to reconnect the next. These fluctuations are not evidence of depth. They are defense mechanisms scrambling to restore equilibrium. The exposed ego cannot tolerate the feeling of smallness, so it oscillates between aggression and vulnerability to regain psychological dominance. In such moments, the temptation is to match intensity with intensity, to argue, to explain, to justify yourself. But that only feeds the storm. Emotional reactivity is the currency of control. When you remain grounded, You deny the injury the drama it seeks. And here is the essential lesson. When someone's emotions are weaponized against truth, your stability becomes your power. When emotional volatility fails to restore control, something more calculated often emerges. The tactics intensify. What once appeared spontaneous becomes strategic. Exposure has removed the comfort of illusion, and now the focus shifts to regaining dominance by any available means. You may notice a sudden return of affection, exaggerated praise, promises of change, reminders of shared memories. This is not reconciliation, it is a calibrated attempt to pull you back into emotional dependency. If that fails, the strategy may pivot. Jealousy is provoked. Third parties are introduced subtly or overtly to create competition. Your insecurities are studied and pressed like hidden buttons. Control is no longer subtle. It becomes deliberate. This escalation reveals something essential. The relationship was never about connection. It was about leverage. When control is threatened, manipulation sharpens. The exposed ego seeks equilibrium not through reflection, but through influence. In this phase, your clarity must deepen. Recognize patterns rather than promises. Observe behavior rather than words. The more strategic the manipulation becomes, the more disciplined your awareness must be. Because the moment you see the pattern clearly is the moment you step outside of it. And power loses its grip when it can no longer deceive. And when every attempt to regain control begins to fail, there is often one final maneuver: the discard. It can appear sudden, almost cold in its execution. After intensity, promises, and emotional turbulence, there is distance, silence, indifference. But do not mistake this for emotional resolution. It is not peace, it is repositioning. The discard serves a psychological function. If she leaves first, she avoids the unbearable experience of being left. If she withdraws abruptly, she can preserve the illusion that she was never invested. Superiority is restored through exit. In this way, abandonment becomes a strategy rather than a wound. It allows the ego to rewrite the ending. I chose to walk away. I was never affected. For you, however, the experience may feel disorienting. You may question whether the connection was ever real. Understand this clearly. Intensity is not intimacy. Attachment built on control collapses when control disappears. The essential task in this moment is not to chase closure, but to reclaim perspective. Do not measure your worth by someone's inability to stay. Measure it by your ability to see clearly and stand firm. Because when someone discards you to protect their ego, and you refuse to chase, you break the cycle that kept you bound. Now, in rare moments, and I emphasize rare, exposure can create something unexpected, a confrontation with the shadow. In the framework of Carl Jung, the shadow represents the disowned aspects of the self, the traits we reject but unconsciously live out. When the persona collapses and the usual defenses fail, there can be a brief opening where illusion no longer protects the ego. In that space, self-awareness becomes possible. But this is not automatic. To face the shadow requires humility, the willingness to admit manipulation, insecurity, envy, and fear without projecting them outward. For someone structured around narcissistic defenses, this is profoundly threatening. The psyche would rather distort reality than dissolve its grand image. And yet, growth can only occur when the mask is willingly removed, not violently torn away. If such a moment of reflection arises, it must be met with accountability, not performance. Words are easy, integration is difficult. Real transformation is quiet, consistent, and uncomfortable. For you, the deeper lesson is this: you cannot force another person into self-awareness. You can only choose your own. And the most powerful transformation in this entire dynamic may not be hers. It may be yours.